Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another broadcast of the BroDiallo Show. I appreciate y'all so much. I got some good news, which brings me down because y'all know I'm the hater innovator, haters number one participator. But, you know, sometimes good things happen despite my best efforts. Anyway, I got my Patreon merch out to my Patreons. And I've been sleeping, man. I've been slacking as slack. I slack. I had a homeboy named Cullen. He used to always say that. I slack. You know, I was slacking. And yes, he was Guyanese before you asked. And anyway, I sent off a mug and a shit ton of buttons. And what else? Some stickers, some BroDiallo stickers, just mad stuff, you know, and I'm very proud of myself. My wife was like, you need to get on top of that. And so Patreon, you know, I'm back on my, what's the opposite of bullshit? You know, plant-based fertilizer. I'm back on my plant-based fertilizer. I'm happy to say that. Thank you to all my Patreons. I mean, everybody that enjoys the BroDiallo broadcast and the BroDiallo universe should be thanking Patreons, because y'all, I mean, I'm for by and of the people, but I'm really I'm for the people, but I'm by the Patreons. And so more to come. We're about to have a Patreon book club and all kind of stuff. So good things are going on. And I met with a brother that's going to be working with the African World Order and BroDiallo Show to get our tech up to par. Just good things happen, you know. And I don't know why they're happening. I don't pray. I don't believe in positive energy or vibrations. I'm not doing any of the shit y'all say. I don't ask the universe. I'm not doing any of the shit y'all say that I have to do to make good things a guan, and yet good things a guan. So, what are you talking about? I do eat mac and cheese. That bro, it's Xmas. Eat some mac and cheese. I be going to town on that vegan mac and cheese. Who you think this is? Yes, the stickers and buttons are back with more merch to come. I was just looking over some new shirt designs, all kind of hats and accessories, all kind of things. AfricanWorldOrder.com. Check in. Yeah, I'll post about that. I should have it up. I have to set up the back room for the thing. And let me tell you something about my book clubs. I ain't like these other, you know, this is a book club for remedial readers, you know. I'm one of them dudes that I was in special ed, and I had to sit in the regular classroom. They had the desk in single file lines and all the face in front, and then in the back of the classroom there'd be a circular table. I was at the circular table in the back. In many of my years, Miss Fox, Miss Bruce, Miss Javin Mard, I ain't gonna never forget y'all. So this is so we ain't gonna be reading a book a day and shit. So the books that we're gonna be working on, we're gonna break them down into sections, into chapters, into digestible places, because, you know, we really want to dissect, analyze, and then apply what we read. We don't just want to get out here and like Wise Intelligence said, read a few books and learn a few truths and then talk about who we blacker than. You know, in fact, one of the first organizations that I founded from the ground up, out of whole cloth, because, you know, I was the type of cat that used to like to join up. But the first organization I ever started started from a book club. We had a book club, and we were going to Mackey's weekly free lectures, Professor William Mackey, and shout out to Khalil. And from Professor Mackey's group, we said, we want to take this further. These weekly lectures are awesome, but we want to learn more and digest more. So we started a book club, and then from the book club, we started what was called the African Race. And RACE was an acronym for Research and Application Collective. So it was research and application, not just research. So anyway, enough of that. Just saying, it's coming through Patreon. And I'm doing this because it was requested by more than a few. And Patreon has the features and the software. So let's do it. And, I'm really happy that they got like audio books and different people for people that more people can participate. So I'm looking forward to that. So far, yes. But we'll see. Maybe we'll take it to discourse. I don't know. All I know is I'm committed to doing it, and I've started work on it. And when it's ready for people to join up and find out, I'll try to put out at least 5 books ahead of time to give people time to get the book. And that's that. So anyway, starting off with that. Now let me say, I have to also start off with an apology. I said something last week that I don't know why I said it. I don't believe it, and it's not true. I understand. No, I had posed a scenario that was unfair. So I got to apologize to 50 Cent because I was talking about the Diddy documentary, and I hadn't watched all of it. I've watched the first 3 episodes. Everybody was like, you got to check it out. You got to check it out. And I gave my 2 cents on it. I won't rehash that. But then I said something when I was, talking about that documentary. And I said, I had the nerve, I had the gall to say that, why is he making a documentary about Diddy when, we're in multiple global crises, multiple global crises affecting all of the world, humanity, that's affecting the Black community from Congo to Sudan, from Haiti to Honduras, Dominican Republic. It's all these crises, and we got to hear about Diddy and baby oil. But then I'm like, did I really say that? And I went back and watched the show. It's like, yeah, what the fuck I say that for? Because it's obvious why. It ain't got nothing to do with 50 Cent. So I apologize to him. It's us. Because there's good shit out there. The documentaries are out there. The articles are out there. The evidence is out there. The books are out there. And nobody want to hear that shit. People would rather hear about baby oil than the coltan being extracted from the soil of the Congo and the atrocities, carried out. People would rather hear about the women that Diddy had in bondage than hear about the open-air slave markets in Libya, about the Africans being dumped in the ocean, African migrants being literally having their boats torpedoed and drowned, and Libyans, Arabs, Muslims in North Africa marching African migrants to the middle of the desert, or driving them out there by the truckloads and dumping them to die in the middle of desert of starvation, dehydration, exposure. Nobody would watch it. It's out there. Earthlings was a great documentary. There's so many good documentaries, exposés, so many, investigative journalists risking their lives to bring people to stories, and nobody pay attention. So that was really a question, and I try to pride myself on being rational. And I think if people take time to watch the BroDiallo Show, I should not waste their time asking asinine questions. It's very obvious. It's very obvious. I mean, if the BroDiallo Show, I'm pretty sure we'd have a lot more support if I was talking about the genitals of famous people and what famous people do with their genitals. Can I even blame you? So I can't believe I was watching that. I'm like, nobody called me out for that, asking that question or bothering 50 Cent with that nonsense. So anyway, that's all I was thinking. So some good news and an apology. We're off to a good start. Oh, there we go. Now it's going downhill from here. I want to talk about something and go into a little bit more detail. I think I should change the motto of this show. The motto of this show, or the mission of this show, is revolutionary Pan-African ideology. Is to analyze, to look at the world and articulate positions and views from a Pan-African, revolutionary Pan-African perspective. I think I might have to do another show on Pan-Africanism, because we don't know what that's all about either. Because it ain't even enough to be Pan-African anymore. Because we got a lot of reactionary, pro-capitalist, pro-Abrahamic religion type people out here claiming to be Pan-African. So we're going to have to do that. So, but anyway, what I want to talk about, what I'm saying is we should probably rename this show. We've been in this country the longest and we understand it the least. We've been in this country the longest and we understand it the least. And I'm out here having conversations, and I do this every time. I'll be like, okay, the BroDiallo Show, we're going to talk about this. I try to put because, it's generally about 4 weeks in a month, and the show's Monday night. So I'm like, next 4 shows, I get the articles, I get the books, I write my little outlines and notes. And then I'm like, get on here and talk about something that wasn't in the budget, that wasn't on the list. And that's because a lot of when I come on here and talk about is influenced by interactions and conversations I have throughout the week. Not that I wanted to. I would like this space to be a unique and separate space. I don't want to come on here trying to act like I'm talking about the issues that affect our people when I'm really just pissed off at one of my sons. So I want the content and my motivations to be pure, but they ain't always. So people have been talking about Venezuela and U.S. going to war with Venezuela, U.S. trying to start a war with Venezuela. If you watch my show a little while ago, I already told you that if the U.S. is announcing to the public, if the United States is announcing to the public that it is either intending to go to war, threaten war, or will engage in war with another country, I promise you, the United States has already been attacking that country for a year or more. By the time they announce a conflict to the public, the United States has already been engaged in warfare. I say that every time. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. So it kind of disturbs me. It's a lot of people out there that I've interacted with. I'm sure nobody listening here that think that the conflict between Palestine and Israel started last fall. A lot of people act that way. This is a conflict over half a century old, and people just now popping up Palestinian flags everywhere. And so in the next year, in the new year, are we going to be seeing Venezuelan flags? You know what I'm saying? So it kind of disturbs me that people in the United States, Black people who live in the United States, can have such a misinterpretation of warfare, the United States, and the system overall. So I just want to take this time to kind of talk about war, because African people, we're at war. Even though the war is one-sided and lopsided, African people, we are at war. And this war takes several, and I'm going to get into that, but I don't want to get into that just now. What I want to start off with is talking about war. The United States has already been attacking Venezuela. And then I even hear some liberals, even if you think you're a leftist, because I was listening to this one liberal give a report on the various hostile actions that the United States is taking against Venezuela and the repositioning of ships and trying to identify allies and who will support, drawing up battle plans. They're already murdering fishermen and all this stuff. And this guy said he condemns the U.S. actions against Venezuela, even though Maduro is a horrible dictator. Maduro is a monster. Maduro must leave office. Maduro should not be in office. Woo, 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 woo. even though all that's true, the U.S. So Maduro's a villain. Maduro's doing all this horrible shit. But this isn't the way to go about fixing the problems of Venezuela. And I thought this guy was a leftist. And that's some liberal shit. The liberals are telling you, the people that, first of all, Maduro ain't doing shit. Maduro is not the villain. It's not two villains. It's like that nonsense where they even say, which is not really a war, but the war between Palestine and Israel. Palestine can't go to war with Israel because Palestine is Israel. They're the exact same place. So you have an invading genocidal settler colonists killing off the original inhabitants of the nation, just like here in the United States. So if the United States went on Lakota territory within the confines of the United States, you wouldn't say, well, the United States is at war with Native America, even though the United States is at war with Native Americans. And there's an ongoing genocide against the native populations of this country. But that's not a sexy genocide. You hashtag or post about that genocide, you don't get much feedback. It's not the genocide du jour. So anyway, let's talk about war, because here's the thing about warfare. If you follow U.S. elections, you'll find that there's an old thing about politics is saying that people vote their wallets. People vote their wallets. And I've seen and heard, and I've worked on so many campaigns at various levels, from basic voter registration to collecting signatures to get people on the ballot, up to being privileged enough to research and write up policies for various public servants, for various bureaucrats. And one thing every politician says, leftist, progressive, reactionary, people vote their wallets. And U.S. voters are always saying, basically, that's all they care about. Are you going to give me some economic relief? Give me some economic security, bring me some economic benefits. And the average American voter could give two fucks about how it's done. They could give two fucks. Whether you destroy an ecosystem, you destroy an indigenous population, or you upend and topple an entire sovereign nation, the average American doesn't give a fuck, because if the economic indicators are all in the going up, if all the companies are in the black and people are told that the economy is on the upswing, they will vote for you. So there are many war criminals that the average good American, your aunties and cousins, people you love, people you call decent people, they'll go out and enthusiastically support international atrocities as long as the money's right, as long as the money's flowing, as long as the economic indicators are on the up. The arrows go up instead of arrows go down. So the United States, with all this technology, with all this written word, all these written policies and standards and laws and regulations, the United States is a barbaric society. The United States is a barbaric society. There are some quotes. Don't ask me where they come from. There's some people that said the United States is nothing but a corporation with the military. And that came from Noam Chomsky, I think. The United States basically functions as a corporation with the military, or that the business of America is business. Bill Gates said this. I think Woodrow Wilson said it. Every time I say this person said this particular quote, they go and tell me somebody who said it before them. So I don't know where it originated. I know Bill Clinton was fond of saying the business of America is business, meaning the whole purpose, the whole reason for forming this entity is to conduct business. And the whole purpose of business is to generate profit. So the United States is a profit machine. It is a profit generating entity. And by law, if you formulate a company that is answerable to shareholders or stockholders, you by law have to put the generation of profit above all other concerns, or you are literally breaking the law. So you look at this nation where people say, well, America's in perpetual warfare. America builds more weapons. distributes more weapons, has more military bases, has the largest military budget and the largest per capita military investment. The United States is a militarist society that was created for profit, which would 1 + 1 = 2, which means profit and warfare are inextricably linked. Profit and warfare are inextricably linked. Profit is the primary goal of capitalism. You cannot have a capitalist system without perpetual warfare. In fact, capitalism was born out of conquest. Capitalism came about in roughly the 16th century. The age of exploration, which is what I was taught in my all-black school. I went to an all-black school in an all-black community with all black teachers and all black students. And those educated black people were sitting up there calling the European invasion and colonization of the world the age of exploration. I'll never forget that from my textbooks. The age of exploration. And I had to memorize that. And we had posters and we had songs, and they would have us making pilgrim hats. And we said that they were explorers, and they were exploring to the moon, exploring the Arctic, exploring to the bottom of the ocean. And nobody ever said any words like profit, colonization, imperialism. I never heard those words in my all black school. Not even, in around high school. When I got to high school, I did have some like radical teachers who would, some liberal or leftist teachers. But all that to say, the United States cannot exist without warfare. And that's why we have all these Veterans Days and all these days to venerate the people. And it is crazy to me because you find some people, not many, who believe that they can stop war, reduce war, bring war criminals to justice while still striving to be entrepreneurial, pro-capitalist, and that thinks that the economy of the U.S. would prosper and would be more beneficial without war, which is confusing because the reality is the economy of the United States would suffer if the United States stopped engaging in unrelenting perpetual warfare. The society, the culture of the United States would greatly benefit from demilitarization. Society, culture, education, the arts, the interpersonal relationships, intimate relationships, cross-cultural, cross-community relationships, state and interstate relationships would all improve if the United States divested from perpetual warfare. But the economy would suffer. We've been so indoctrinated where we think the health of the economy is the same as the health of the state. But in capitalist economies, the health of the society has no direct correlation between the health of the society. You can have a thriving economy and a deteriorating society. You can have a thriving economy and a deteriorating ecosystem. You can have a thriving economy, massive homelessness, housing instability, food instability. You can be generating record profits and there will be layoffs and factory closing. And even going through all this since the 80s, going through all this shit nonstop, people still say, when they tell you the Dial industrial average, when they tell you that the commodities markets is in flux, people get nervous. People get scared. Oh, the economy's doing bad. Ooh. And even Obama presided over one of the most obvious economic recoveries that brought no benefits to, or minimum benefits to, the masses of the people People were still saying Obama saved the economy as they suffered. And the elites, the wealthy people, the capitalists hold the society hostage because they say, well, if you threaten my profits, I'll close shit down. I'll leave people unemployed. I might just take everything I got and move to Dubai. If you try to tax me, if you try to regulate me, if you try to prosecute, investigate me, I'll go to Dubai. And we sitting here stupid as fuck thinking, if all the rich people who's going to invent stuff? Who's going to innovate? Who's going to innovate? Who's going to bring us all this wonderful shit that makes us miserable? For who? Because we believe that money makes things. And money is evidence of intelligence. Money is synonymous with beauty. So we have so many misconceptions from deep-seated indoctrination. So, hey, what's up, Fode? Good to see you, bro. So all that to say, the United States will be a perpetual warfare nation and a perpetual profit machine until capitalism and white hegemony have been subverted, deconstructed, purged from this land. And the vast majority of the U.S. public are complicit with this. They're either willfully ignorant of it or they enthusiastically support it. Anybody that support capitalism, entrepreneurialism, the generation and concentration of profit, anybody, then and they turn around and say they oppose war, they're anti-war, that is a person who is either lying or ignorant. So I've been around a long time. The first anti-war protest I went to is when Bill Clinton was bombing Iraq, and Monica Lewinsky was scheduled to speak before a joint session of Congress. And they were bringing in Monica Lewinsky, and there was talk of impeachment and he didn't get impeached for a blowjob. That's what everybody said. He didn't get impeached for a blowjob. You know, he got impeached for perjury. He lied to Congress, or he lied within a committee. He lied to a committee while he was under oath. So he got in, people like to say, but nobody, if history had written it accurately, say Bill Clinton was impeached for perjury, then we would have forgot about it. We'd have forgot about it. So anyway, Bill Clinton, at the time she was going to give a talk before Congress and it was going to be aired, Bill Clinton initiated a bombing raid. And people are like, that's too much. Already this is an illegal war, and now he's bombing just to cover up his own proclivities. I mean, bombing for oil is one thing, but bombing to keep from having your indiscretions exposed, that was a bit too far. This is the early 90s. And there was kind of like spontaneous protest and public outcry, and I wasn't no internet. So some activist people I knew, a couple of this little conscious crew we had called the Inner City Natives, we had gone to this little protest in the plaza in Kansas City. And that was that. The bombing still went, no consequences. He was impeached, but not convicted, and therein lies history. And people were always saying they didn't care about the international war crimes, because Bill Clinton is an international war criminal, amongst many other things. They didn't care about his war crimes, and they didn't care about his, actions with Monica Lewinsky. Wow. Okay. I'm gonna have to come back to that. How dare you? International war crimes. they cared that the economy was going strong. And Bill Clinton served 2 terms. Bill Clinton presided over record profits by the multinational corporations. Bill Clinton advanced NAFTA and the North American Free Trade Agreement, and he just supercharged the economy. Stock market hit record highs, and people are like, oh, it's going to be all good. And people said, it doesn't matter what Bill Clinton did, the economy was going good. And at least those people are scumbags. They're the scum of the earth, but at least they're honest. So now I want to talk to the people like myself who oppose war, right? I want to talk to the people who say, well, we don't like this. This ain't how it's supposed to go. This ain't how it's supposed to be, right? We seem, even though we disagree with perpetual warfare and we're anti-capitalist, we don't seem to understand. We just know it's bad, but we don't understand the hows, the whys, and more importantly, we don't understand how to stop it, how to address it, how to reverse it, how to slow it down, how to convince our fellow brothers and sisters, conscious people or unconscious people, how to wake them the fuck up, right? So maybe there are some things we can articulate about war and the realities of war that will help us and others stop this perpetual war, right? And if you've been listening to me for a long time, I'm ashamed to say this almost. There's no reason I should be ashamed. But that old saying, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. But if you go listen to me, if you've been listening to me for a while, you know I used to do a radio show, Q4 Radio. That's how the BroDiallo show started off, as a radio program. And like my earliest radio broadcasts, they're not even online because they might be in the Q4 archives. But I wasn't even on YouTube. I wasn't even putting it on social media. I was just going into the radio studio, pushing the green button, doing my show, taking calls, and then going home. That was it. So, and then later I started like taping it for social media, and then now I'm all the way on. So I went from radio exclusive, radio, social media, now all social media. But if you go back to the early, like my first online, it's if you go back to like my first maybe dozen or so shows, you would hear me saying that the Department of Defense should be called the Department of War. The Department of Defense should be called the Department of War. It's a lie. It's hypocrisy. This is not a Department of Defense. The United States has never fought a defensive war. The United States has never fought a defensive war in my lifetime or in your lifetime, and I can't think of one truly defensive war that the United States has ever fought. And so it's a lie to call it the Department of Defense. It should be called the Department of War. And Obama was president, and Obama was out there. Obama said he believes in Israel's right to defend itself, and Obama was arming and providing cover for Israel. Obama was engaged in illegal wars and conflicts from Honduras, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. And I'm like, the Department of Defense should be called the Department of War. And then it has happened. And I have to say, as much as I complained about it, it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good. And just be careful what you wish for. Just be careful what you wish for. Be careful what the blood clot you wish for. Because here I am. It is now called the Department of War. That is the truth. That is a very honest statement. And the liberals out here, hemming and hawing, how dare he? And I'm sure the next Democratic president will rename it the Department of Defense, because, prior to, it was initially called the Department of War. I don't remember the history, man. This was like undergrad poli-sci trivia. Let's see. When was that done? Yeah, right after 1949. August 10th, 1949. Thank you, computer. Truman named it. It was called the Department of War since, its founding. And then they changed it to the Department of Defense. And that was because of Cold War propaganda. And now it's back. And peace. Why don't we ever have a Department of Peace? So anyway, but also at that same time, the reason, here's another little piece of trivia I might get into. War is essentially illegal. The Treaty of Versailles, war was made illegal. So many nations that had departments of wars either disbanded them or renamed them because it's like the Department of Crack Cocaine. It was illegal. So the United States changed the Department of War to the Department of Defense, not because it had intended to change anything besides the name, because warfare was essentially rendered illegal under the UN Charter, which the United States is a signatory to. But we might come back to that. Let me talk about U.S. war in particular. The United States has one basic principle when it comes to warfare negotiation with other nations, and that's mutually assured destruction. MAD, mutually assured destruction. So the United States, when it's engaging with any other country anywhere else in the world, the United States says, does this nation have the equal or greater capacity to destroy me as I do to destroy it? And if the answer is yes, then the United States begins negotiations and all kind of clandestine shit, but there will be no direct open aggression against that nation. The United States will not engage in direct or open aggression against a nation that is in a position of mutually assured destruction. Only a handful of nations generally have that position, and all of them are nuclear armed states. Most of Western Europe, France, UK, Germany, nuclear armed. What's the other? Russia, China, and that's it. At one time, South Africa was a nuclear arms nation, but Nelly, sellout Nelly, the Uncle Tom Mandela. North Korea, of course. Now, the second tier down from having your own nuke is to be aligned with the nuclear power. So when Cuba was aligned with the Soviet Union, it had greater levels of protection. When, what's the other nations? Cuba's the main one. But India and Pakistan are actually nuclear power. See, but the India and Pakistan is unique because India and Pakistan are nuclear powers and they're regional powers, but they're theocratic things. But you're right. You're absolutely right. India and Pakistan are the two newest nuclear armed nations in the world. Yes, I did call Nelson Mandela Uncle Tom, one of the biggest sellouts in Black history, African history, but I digress. Now, don't talk to me about Nelly Mandela, Desmond Tutu, or the Council. What they call that shit? The Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Israel, Israel does not have nukes. Israel said they don't have nukes. And I, for one, when's the last time you called Israel in a lie? Israel, yes. So mutually assured destruction. Either you have to be a nuclear power or you have to, and people say, well, Cuba, you said, was aligned with the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union disintegrated, the United States said for decades that the reason that we have embargoes and sanctions against the Cuba is because of their alignment with the Soviet Union. But once the Soviet Union was dissolved and the dome of protection was removed from Cuba, the United States intensified its attack on the Cuban people. It expanded the sanctions on Cuba. It increased its incursions on Cuban sovereign territory. So that was a lie. People want to talk about Nelly Mandela. I shouldn't have said that. I ain't got time to talk about Nelly Mandela. Sold the whole nation out. The revolution sold out the Tanzanian people's revolutionary struggle. Goddamn sellout. What was I saying? Mutually assured destruction. If you are not in a position of mutually assured destruction, then you can expect to be dictated to. I don't care where you are. I don't care how far your border is from the United States. You can be on the other side of the planet. If you are not in a position of mutually assured destruction with the United States is going to, or you are not aligned with another superpower or nuclear armed power, and generally being aligned with another superpower means, but you're not a nuclear armed state, means that you're basically the puppet of that other nation. If you don't fall under the influence or domination of a different nation. But the United States in the international community is a barbaric system. We have all these treaties. We have all these diplomats flying coast to coast and pole to pole all over the world. But when we look at the nature and reality of power in the world in 2025, it is nothing more than high-powered nuclear armed barbarism. There's so many laws and treaties have been signed on and endorsed and supported by the U.S. government that the U.S. has even imposed treaties and international laws, bringing foreign criminals to international justice through Interpol and Geneva as the United States violates the law. We live in a might makes right system that tells us that it is about laws and justice, and you will succeed by merit, and you will remain safe and secure as long as you adhere to the laws and respect your fellow man. It's all a fucking lie. This is no different than the Vikings getting off their longboats and hatcheting unarmed monks and running off with their riches. That is still the state of the world today. It is high-tech barbarism, mutually assured destruction. And that's what allows Trump to get up, because it's not only is it against the law to bomb innocent civilians, foreigners, not only is it against the law to call for the toppling of a government, it is against the law to threaten. And it's crazy because Trump will literally go on the news and threaten the whole world with nuclear annihilation. But if you go on social media and say anything that could be identified as a threat against him or his regime, the feds is coming to your door. Shit is wild. Shit is wild. So voting pocketbook means voting for perpetual global warfare. The UN, the World War I was called the war to end all wars, which seems silly to us. It seems really silly to us that people really believe that after World War I, that is the very first industrial scale war to ever occur on Earth, where industrial production and the industrial revolution scale technology and industrial revolution scale production came into play in warfare. Prior to that, the main people to die in wars were soldiers. The primary people who died in wars were soldiers. War were most dangerous to soldiers. After World War I and the industrial application to warfare, the primary victims of war were civilians. There used to be, we all heard the word battlefield, the battlefield. I'm on the battlefield. My church, my uncle's church, his song was on the battlefield for my Lord. Battlefield used to be a thing, a real thing. Like, this is the arena of battle. Because even long-range weaponry, this is the first military that employed airplanes. There wasn't no airplanes. You had dudes on horses were the fastest people on the battlefield. Dudes riding horses. They get to where you got to go quickest. And you had boats, sailboats, and steamboats. So the ability to move soldiers, the ability to attack from a distance, all that shit. And not only that, it was the first military conflict to employ poison gas. See, people say that World War II was the beginning of bio warfare. That's not true. Bio warfare had been going on. I mean, Genghis Khan was hurling the body's infected corpses over the walls during sieges. That's bio warfare. Giving blankets, disease infected blankets to your enemy. That's bio. So it's not the founding of bio warfare, but it's the founding of chemical warfare. I mean, I guess it's semantics. But people, when they saw that level of destruction using gas, they literally sat down and said, we can't do war anymore. It used to be you would have a general and you read about the history of Napoleon and how he made mortars and cannons more effective. And he was like one of the greatest war strategists. And you'd look at these various historical battles and clash between armies and these naval armadas going at it. And it was a grand, honorable history. And people are like, this particular war, you could have a soldier or a warrior who trains all his life from 12 years old to 25 years old to be the strongest, most capable soldier. And then some untrained street thug with a rifle to run out on the battlefield, the strongest, greatest soldier ever, and breathe in and your lungs disintegrate inside your body. And so a lot of the old school soldiers like, this is not honorable. This type of warfare, these conflicts, the path of destruction, the rate of destruction, the expansion of destruction. We cannot fight wars with this devastating type of technology. And because we have such great technological know-how and we have all of this brilliance that goes into war, we should be intelligent enough to end warfare, to make warfare untenable because of the rate of destruction. And so they said World War I will show to humanity because that's also the moving pictures and photography was becoming more widespread and the telegraph. And so information was able to spread much more widely, aggressively. So people will have the knowledge of war. They'll see the massive destruction of war. And the World War I will be the war to end all wars because humanity cannot survive. With this level of production capacity and technology, we cannot survive wars. And so the Treaty of Versailles, one of the main reasons they put such harsh penalties on the Germans is to say, we want to show you that if you engage in aggressive warfare, you will be crushed. You will be penalized. Your nation, especially if you are a nation engaged in warfare against neighboring nations, you will cease to exist as a nation. So what happened to Germany after World War I was really a message to all other nations that might get the idea to say, hey, I want to build up an army and march my soldiers off to war to gain territory or to steal resources. Now, it's crazy to think that people that almost 100 years ago believed that was going to be the final, over 100 years ago. I'm thinking about the day for World War II. But the very policies that they employed to prevent war from ever happening again actually were some of the key factors that motivated the Second World War. And I don't like calling these world wars because it's only a world war because the Cold War was more of a world war than World War I and World War II. But if white people believe they are the world, talk about we are the world, they are the world, they are the children. So when a bunch of white folks get to hacking and slashing at each other, that's a world war. All of Africa and in Western Europe, one of the most sparsely populated areas on the planet Earth is Europe. And Europe ain't even a continent. But I'm not going to get into that. All I'm saying is this world war shit is bullshit. So all of Africa, all of Asia, all of Central and South America could all go to war against each other. And the white folks wouldn't call it a world war because people who matter aren't dying. They were the largest continent could go to war. Africa, people won't say shit. The most densely populated areas in the world, Asia, the archipelagos of Asia and the subcontinent and Asia Major, they could all go to war. It won't be a world war. It's a regional conflict. Nothing to worry. But two white nations go to war. Neither one of them got more than 10 million people population. It's a world war. It was because people who died didn't matter. So I prefer to call it the European murder orgy. Let's call it that. What are the European murder orgy? The Emo 1 and Emo 2. Let's call it that from here on. Let's change. Let's usurp the dominant paradigm. That is not World War I. What's World War I? If you're going to say World War I, say the European conquest of Africa is World War I. European conquest of North and South America, that's World War II. Europeans' incursion into Asia and the Middle East, that's World War III. Let's count when our people are dying as the real significant conflicts. And the European murder orgies, that's just a blip. So yes, the emos, Emo 1 and Emo 2. But moving on, I want to pick up the pace and wrap this up quick. We have to understand that as U.S. citizens, we are born into war. Everything we enjoy and that we think is good in our lives is a byproduct of war. Even our rights as citizens, the opportunities we have, the relative level of wealth and comfort that the average American enjoys as juxtaposed to the average citizen of Latin America, Central America, Africa, Asia, especially South Asia. Everything we enjoy is a byproduct of war. It ain't just the money. I mean the technology, GPS, radar, microwaves, radios, the internet, AI. All of these things were created by DARPA. Everything that we enjoy. Siri, if you asking Siri to turn on your lights or asking Siri the weather, robotics, calculators, navigation, if you out here playing with drones, taking pictures with drones. I had a cousin who just started a little drone survey business. All of that shit was made for the express purpose of killing mass number of people over a short period of time. And then the public funds these technologies. The technologies are developed using public funds, public sciences, and public resources and public facilities. So the masses of people, we fund this shit. The government takes this through socialistic, everybody put in, but not everybody extracts. That's the only difference. The only difference between socialism and capitalism is that socialism is everybody put in, everybody get out. Capitalism is everybody put in, but only the capitalists get out. So they develop the internet using public resources from everybody, and then they hand it over to private industry, private investors. It's the main difference. And then they tell economists, listen, we got a fucked up system of legalized theft. So we need you to come up with complex terminology and complex formula to make this shit look fair. And to trick these goddamn fools into thinking they have a stake in this shitty system. So everything you enjoy is a byproduct of war. Which means to say that if you're a good American person, your obligation is to the rest of the fucking world to oppose the U.S. war machine. One thing I have to tell you about empires. The United States is the most well-armed, aggressive empire since Genghis fucking Khan. And the United States brings benefits to us, not through innovation, not through competition, not through good governance. It brings us relief through perpetual warfare across the globe, including internally. And not us. I mean, the white majority. The white majority, mainly. And they're brand new to this because they're losing what they got. Because even what the white majority got through the New Deal, the white middle class was manufactured through public policies and welfare and social safety inputs. That's where the white majority wealth came from. Prior to that, you go back to the Gilded Age. This condition in America where only a few wealthy people own everything and the white masses are all smoked out. You know, all the white gangs and Aryan Brotherhood, all these white nationalist groups are recruiting more and more disaffected. These incels going on mass shooting. This is nothing but turn of the century industrial America. During the first and second industrial revolution, white poverty was through the roof. The average white person was poor, and the only thing they had was a drinking fountain that a Negro couldn't drink out of. Other than that, but they were going home to homes that didn't have indoor plumbing. I can go downtown and drink out of the water fountain that the Negroes have no access to, but you're going home to a goddamn trailer with fucking dirt floors and an outhouse. And by and large, white folks tend to like that fucking bargain for some reason. Because every now and then a white person will arise in the white ranks and be like, hey, this is the working class struggle. We should abandon this whiteness, this concept of whiteness, join the working class masses and rise up against the capitalists. And what do white people do? They stone them, they exile those white people. But I digress. So we have to be you can't be anti-capitalist without being anti-war, and you can't be anti-war without being anti-capitalist. There's so many people who claim to be from liberals to people who claim to be leftist and progressive, earn your liberation, earn your leisure type, pro-entrepreneurial, pro-investment Negroes. And it's one thing I always say about, we focus a lot on people getting the bag. We like to talk about Jay-Z, rags to riches type stories. Oh, he was hustling crack in his community and now he's a billionaire. Let me tell you something about a fiat economy. The money depreciates hourly. The dollar you had in your pocket today is worth less than it was yesterday. So the only way getting rich, and I don't want to say it's easy, but you can get rich. But it's a lot harder to stay rich than it is to get rich. And the only way to get rich and to stay rich is to put your money, venture capitals, is to put your money in profit generating enterprises and industries. And all profit generating enterprises and industries have to be tied in with the military. Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, his name, Elon Musk. Even these things, you think social media is all about sending pictures and watching twerkers. And hey, bless your hearts to the twerkers and the people sharing beautiful photos. That's all good. But this is military infrastructure, and they get military contracts. And anytime you look at any bundle of wealth, whether it's hip hop wealth or internet tech wealth or resource wealth, entrepreneurialism, it leads back to material. It comes out of the military or it feeds back into the military. Even if you're doing fucking hair, and you got a bunch of hair places, the resources, the palm oil, the plastics. So the U.S. military goes all over the world suppressing the currency and suppressing the sovereignty of all other nations so that all other nations can be cheap means of labor and means of cheap resources so that the United States does not have to compete with foreign nations or pay foreign nations market rates for their resources. And the military maintains that. So no matter what type of business you're in, you selling hamburgers, look into the destruction of the rainforest. Look at the destruction of the rainforest and the expansion of cattle lands in Brazil. And one time there was a socialist president I don't know about him now. He seems a little shaky. But at one time, the president said, we're going to stop the destruction of the rainforest. And the U.S. military was like, oh, looks like you're a terrorist. A terrorist is anybody that disrupts capital. Anybody that obstructs the flow of capital. What do they call it? Currency. Money is allowed to move freely across borders all over the world. Do you know how fucked up that is? That human beings cannot go from here to there? You could have some upheaval in your country, some natural disaster, flooding, tsunami, a volcano, a major chemical spill. You could have some horrible shit happen in your country, or an economic or political or coup d'etat. And you can't gather up your shit and say, well, that space over there is more stable, so I'm going to move over there. I'm going to gather up all my shit and go over there. If you're in Haiti and you say, well, the Dominican Republic is right next door, I'm going to gather up shit because shit is chaotic here. I'm going to go to the Dominican Republic, and they will shoot you. They will incarcerate you. They'll throw you back in the flames. But if you got money in Haiti, if you got money in Indonesia, if you got money in Brazil, you can move millions of billions of dollars across borders freely with no obstruction, and this is written into law. So people can't move freely to pursue a better life or to even save their lives, whereas money is allowed to move freely across borders. That is an inhumane. Like I tell you, we live in high-tech barbarism. And a lot of times we don't recognize war because war manifests in all ways. The United States is involved in perpetual war. And the moment, as Gil Scott-Heron says, the only problem with peace is you can't make no money from it. The only problem with peace is that you can't make money. Peace does not lend itself to profit. Only conflict. And even like we're going to go back to military, but even if you're not conflicted in yourself, if you don't look in the mirror, if you look in the mirror and you're at peace with what you see, you're less likely to generate profit. You're not going to buy that rollie, that chain, diamonds all on your neck. You're not going to go out there and buy it and get augmentations. So even if you're at peace with yourself, you're less likely. That's why 90% of advertising is telling you it's something wrong with you. Take this pill, buy this product. If you want to be sexy, if you want to be desirable, if you want to have more friends, peace does not. So if you're an individual at peace with yourself, you're bad for business. If you're a nation that's at peace, it's bad for business. That's why all these conflicts are going. The conflict in the Congo is being fueled through Rwanda, and everybody loves Kagame. Where are you Negroes looking up to Kagame's ass for? Because if a place is in disruption at peace, you're going to burn through money. As an individual that's not at peace with themselves, they tend to fool and their money is soon departed. People that are emotionally, psychologically unstable tend to not be able to hold on to things. And if they got a lot of money, Michael Jackson, they tend to blow. Same thing for a nation. An unstable nation, coup d'etats and internal conflicts and foreign invasions destabilizes. So when before they could have economists and researchers and geologists go out and say and survey the land and say, well, these are the resources we have. This is the demand for these resources. These are the various markets that want these resources. And also the people who live here, even though they want the profit from the resources, they also want to be able to live on the land. So these are the more expensive extraction methods. The more expensive extraction methods will reduce profits, but they'll keep the land and the ecosystem healthy. The motherfucking capitalists don't want to hear all that shit. So they fund terrorist organizations through the back door. Or they say, well, we want to be the good Yankee Doodle freedom lover and democracy lovers. We'll pay Israel to be our attack dog. Or we'll pay Israel to pay the third or fourth party and have plausible deniability, degrees of separation from the conflict that we're funding, that we're arming, that we're fueling. The United States makes up less than 5% of the global population, but accounts for over 40% of the weapons out there. Makes up for 40% of the weapons out there. The United States is not just a warfare perpetuating, and then the top, France, Germany, Italy, UK, more than half the weapons in the black world, the brown world, the yellow world, come from the white world. People don't have vaccines. People don't have healthy food. They don't have agricultural equipment. But they got weapons, even in my fucking neighborhood. Right now, here in Chicago, if I walked out the front door right now, I live on the south side of Chicago. If I walked out the door right now, it'd be easier for me to buy a goddamn gun than to get a decent book. This is weird. I was just talking to this brother from Zimbabwe who lives in South Africa. And he said it was all but impossible to find a book by Frantz Fanon. I didn't even think about the deficit of radical thought on the African continent, but that's a whole nother discussion. So the United States is in a position called full spectrum dominance. That's the goal of the United States. The United States still views itself as the world's sole superpower. And the numbers kind of, and because, you know, you get people that go online every day to talk about the fall of America, the rise of China, the rise of BRICS. This BRICS talks is really some bullshit. How you going to look at BRICS as a liberator when half of BRICS are dictatorships? You know, half of BRICS are anti-democratic, pro-capitalist dictatorships. So it's a difference between overthrowing and replacing. If you go to a woman in an abusive relationship and say, well, I'm going to replace your husband. You know, Modi is a Hindu nationalist engaged in massacres against Muslims and threatening regional nuclear conflict. Putin, I ain't even going to talk. The love some of these black suckers got for Putin, as if Putin has any positive alternatives to the West. But I digress. This BRICS talk. But the United States is the planet's sole superpower and has been the planet's sole superpower since the fall of the Soviet Union. Damn near, 1993, 93, 94? Who cares? The year don't fucking matter. Right? Right? So the United States started this thing and says, listen, we're the sole superpower. The Soviet Union's gone, and we've got some regional powers. We got the Asian tiger economies in Southeast Asia. India is one putting rockets in the air and producing some of the best engineers and tech. So what we're going to do is saying, well, some of these emerging economies, we're going to go and negotiate with them and say, yes, you can have your regional power. You can have your little client states. They say that all the time. You can have your client states, but you have to be subordinate to us. You have to orient your economy towards manufacturing and export. You have to make sure you can only expand your military to such a degree, but we want full spectrum dominance because they say this is the American century or new American century. And basically, the United States says it's going to prevent the rise of any rivals. The United States will not allow for the emergence of an economic or military rival. That the United States, once it secures global dominance, will sustain global dominance and use all resources at its disposal to sustain global dominance for no other reason than to generate profits for those who own the means of production, to sustain white hegemony and capitalism. That is total warfare. And so the United States says we're going to have to be a perpetual war because the natural inclination of human beings and the relationship between nations is to level. As Kwame Ture says, human beings have an instinctive love of justice. So when there is an imbalance, when there is someone taking more than their share, people instinctively oppose it. It just doesn't sit right with people when they observe it, unless you are a psychopath. And now we understand, thanks to the research and instruction of Dr. Bobby E. Wright, The psychopathy is a cornerstone of their culture. In fact, when people emerge from their culture, their community, their race, who are not psychopaths, they become ostracized. They reproduce psychopathy, their whole culture, their whole identity, all of their intimate social relations and external relations are all psychopathic. The psychopathic racial personality, Urugu, Iceman's Inheritance, going all the way back to everybody that takes the time to look at their collective psyche, or the good documentary, The Corporations, are psychopathic entities by law. By law, right? And so they have all these types of warfare, right? Now, there's two types of conflict. Well, there's three, but two that are pertinent. You have ascending, descending, and lateral. I talked about that. I can get back into it, right? When it comes to warfare, and warfare is nothing more than sustained organized violence. Sustained organized violence. Two groups, where it could be a nation, it could be a tribe, it could be a gang even. Two people engaged in a violent conflict, a violent armed sustained conflict. And you can define those, right? But you have two types. One type of warfare is a crime. The other type of warfare is just. Even according to white folks, you have defensive war, and those wars are like class warfare, anti-colonial warfare, anti-slavery uprisings, when oppressed people organize and arm themselves to commit violence against their oppressors. That is the only justified, legal, and noble warfare. Those are called defensive wars, right? All other forms of warfare can be defined as aggressive warfare or war of conquest. And they take different forms and employ different methodologies. You have civil wars, and most civil wars are two oppressive factions fighting each other. Most civil wars are not good versus evil. It's one oppressive faction fighting another oppressive faction. And then there are some civil wars that are not truly civil wars, such as Rwanda. Rwanda was a proxy war. And Amy Goodman in Democracy Now! At the time when the Rwandan fratricide was being conducted, she was one of the only media outlets with Democracy Now! To report that there were white, South African, and other mercenaries on the ground conducting and overseeing the conflict. It wasn't just one population of Africans got up one day and decided, let's kill the other population of Africans. That was a proxy war. It was not truly a civil war, but I digress. And most civil wars in Africa and coup d'etats. Most civil wars in Africa and coup d'etats are not truly civil wars. There are external forces, external people picking in the whole conflict. And the main thing that you understand about a war is who profits, who benefits. Even the Bosnian War. But I digress. But you do have conventional war, which is what most of us recognize as war, conventional warfare. One military posses up and fights another military. Two legitimate factions. And a legitimate faction is a faction that is recognized and supported by the state. So I can't go out here and raise an army, but I can go enlist in the military that's sanctioned. So you have two state-sanctioned fighting forces, two government-sanctioned fighting forces going at each other. It's, even though it's the most widely understood form of warfare, it's the least common form of modern warfare. It's the least common, right? So then civil warfare, by and large, the things that we call civil wars are more than likely proxy war. And a proxy war is basically a conflict where the people who are fighting are not the ones engaged in the conflict. Like Ukraine is fighting a proxy war. The Ukraine is a proxy for NATO and the US interest. It makes no sense because Ukraine has a lot of beef with the former Soviet Union and the Russian Federation. But when you're up against two forces, that's a proxy war for the U.S. Syria was a proxy war. Um, Yemen. So a proxy war is basically when one or both of the fighting forces are being controlled, directed, or fighting in the interest or on behalf of a force, a government, a corporation that is not directly engaged in the fighting, but is directing the fighting, arming, funding the fighting, and deriving the primary benefit from the fight. That's the proxy war, right? And now this newest form of warfare, cyber warfare. It takes them in cyber warfare is basically attacking the digital infrastructure. You have psychological warfare, and that can be carried out by public and private industries. And even now, social media is the number one source of psychological warfare. And we don't recognize it. It's probably one of the most common and persistent forms of psychological warfare. So, and then you have economic warfare, such as sanctions, freezing the funds. The United States has stolen money from Iran, has stolen money from Venezuela. The United States, where I was talking about how money by law is allowed to move freely across borders, and now, but they can freeze your funds. The economic warfare, the United States poisoned cattle in Cuba. They destroyed and contaminated land and crops in Cuba. You have cultural warfare and all that. And then you have guerrilla warfare, right? Oh, hold on. You have guerrilla warfare. And guerrilla warfare, which is more formally called asymmetrical warfare, is generally, it is a form of tactics and strategy. It's tactics and strategy. Oh shit. All right, give me a second. I'm gonna put something on for y'all. Y'all give me a second, and I'll be right back. Gotta go grab something. Be right back.
When that feces hit that oscillating rotator, pistols popping at your face, I never needed freedom papers. Faith in Christ, Rugers and armor like 15s. Allahu Akbar, John 3:16. Freedom of death and patience make us cage birds sing. I love the feeling of the power that recoil bring. I love the way my wife and mama make me pump my wings. I love happy and round bird, make me think new things. Right bones, right songs, and that struggle lifelong. Change all you want and you can never be long. So I stay at my own lane, on my own lawn, and I bid y'all to do until I see.
All right. Oh, Skip is so dope. Anyway, in guerrilla warfare tactics, many of us think that guerrilla warfare is something unique to or that is only utilized by freedom fighters, because we know the handbook on guerrilla warfare, Kwame Nkrumah, Ho Chi Minh, and General Yap, and Ernesto Che Guevara, and some of our favorite heroes throughout history were guerrilla fighters. The Republicans and many of the Nazis, many of the communists who were fighting against Nazis employed guerrilla warfare. But the reality is that the oppressor can employ guerrilla warfare as well. Guerrilla warfare is not just freedom fighters, anti-colonial fighters. The Maroons were guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla fighters, the Seminole, our Seminole ancestors. These were all guerrilla fighters. And most standing armies and legitimate armies supported by the state or a nation, they still, like the United States has its own guerrilla warfare fighters. And often the United States or Israel would utilize guerrilla soldiers when they either don't want to be publicly associated with the operation, so they want to send in some people to do something clandestine, or they don't have a true foothold. They don't have the logistical means of carrying out conventional warfare, so they'll drop in guerrilla fighters or what are called jackals or saboteurs. What's his name? His name escapes me. Why are names just jumping out of my head today? What's his name? Let's see. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. John Perkins. See, I was thinking John Pilger, because John Pilger, check out John Pilger's. I always get John Pilger and John Perkins. Yeah, the CIA and its operatives engage in guerrilla warfare. So, guerrillas, you can't just say, well, a guerrilla fighter is always someone, a communist, an anarchist, an anti-colonial fighters. Tom Perkins. No. No, that's not. See, you're confusing me. It's John Perkins. But I always think John Pilger. And sometimes when I'm talking about John Pilger, I'll say John Perkins. And sometimes, white folks, get some more diversity in names. Anyway, so there is guerrilla warfare. But John Perkins kind of laid out the methodology for U.S. conquest, modern day conquest. First, they send in the economic hitmen. The economic hitmen are people who work for the federal government but are not on the federal government payroll. So all over this world, and all the companies in the United States that do business overseas, and it doesn't matter chemical or cosmetics or even entertainment. There was that one movie about when they went into Iran using a movie production company, movie production media companies, some of these big black-owned businesses, right? Yes, guerrilla warfare is a technique and a style. And conventional militaries kept losing or being fought to stalemates against guerrilla forces. And so they said, damn, so the United States, the Army rages engage in guerrilla warfare. Which seems counterintuitive, because the only reason you're doing guerrilla warfare is like Che Guevara said in his book on guerrilla warfare, literally wrote the book on it. Once you get to a certain level of conventional forces, then you don't need to employ guerrilla tactics anymore. So that's kind of like a guerrilla army. Once it overthrows the oppressive states, once it implements a communist or socialist government, then they can switch over to conventional armies and conventional forces and conventional tactics. But I digress. John Perkins said they send in the hitmen. And the hitmen, they come with suits. I don't think nobody carries briefcases anymore. I was going to say suit and briefcase. I'm showing my age. Whenever I fly and come and go and I don't see the businessmen with whatever happened to a briefcases. Now they carry like laptop bags. I continue to digress. But these men, they're the ones who go to cocktail parties and they go and talk to labor leaders, and they go overseas and talk to people who are in labor, from leaders in the mining and agricultural sectors and leaders in the government and private sector, and say, hey, listen, we're reasonable. Just do this, sign that, or go along with this particular policy, and you can make it happen. And if you reject the hitmen, because their only interest there is to keep the cost of labor, keep the cost of resources low, and to make sure that you do not form any type of alliance or agreement with any powers or entities that the United States does not sanction. So basically saying, govern yourselves in the interest of America. They go to Jamaica. They go to Honduras. They went to Venezuela before the Bolivarian Revolution. They go to Mexico. They go throughout Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, and they say to these leaders in business, listen, you can enrich yourself. You can get money. You can get rich enough. They'll go to a Nigerian businessman or a Nigerian diplomat or elected official and say, hey, you go along with us. You'll be wealthy enough to send your child off to some elite academy. You'll have a beautiful house. Now your country around you will be destabilized, dysfunctional, and impoverished. But you yourself, you can make bank. You can get bank in Ghana, You know, they'll go to leaders, even the militant black leaders, Mugabe, and say, Mugabe, listen, you get sick. You know, you can have all your black rhetoric. You notice a lot of these guys that had a Mobutu, they'll go to these guys, 70. Who's the guy in they even the good people, like what's that boy's name? Lavalas. Damn it. I just don't have a name. The Lavalas leader. Oh, Aristide. Oh, Aristide. Sometimes freedom fighters come, and those economic hitmen will come to true freedom fighters. I believe Aristide was sincerely a man of the people. And they whooped him and ran him out of Haiti. And they were basically like, yo, we'll let you go back to power, but you're going to do things our way. Right? But I digress. So they go in and they talk pretty to them and say, hey, you can get your personal wealth because we can give you 2 or 3 billion while we extract literally $1 trillion from your economy. You can be a multimillionaire while we'll extract billions. And that's what the hitmen do. And they sit down and have them sign contracts and exclusive agreements. But if you reject them and say, no, I'm not here to enrich myself. I'm not trying to line my pockets. Like Kwame Nkrumah told them, get the fuck out of my country. Like they knew Steve Biko would never take an agreement like that. So they were like, let's get rid of Biko and put Mandela on ice. Because when we put Mandela in charge, he'll go with it. If they fail, they send in the jackals. And these are the guerrillas. These are the capitalist guerrillas. And they want the leader who won't negotiate with them to lose legitimacy. He will lose legitimacy. So they go in and they sabotage. They set fire to shit. They move money around. They bribe the opposition or big up the opposition. They frame the leader for crime. They'll put some weird pornography on him, and they'll go into his office and put in a copy of Mein Kampf and take a picture. It's like, look, this capitalist anarchist African is reading Mein Kampf. They put a copy of Mein Kampf in what's that dude? God damn it, the Panamanian general. I ain't even going. But there was a Panamanian head of state. They put Mein Kampf in his drawer, and like, oh, look at this man. We went into his office, and he's reading mine. He's a Nazi. Like, dude don't even know where Germany is. Never heard of a Nazi. A Spaniard, an indigenous head of state reading Mein Kampf. So anyway, it didn't work in Cuba either. Well, there's reasons why they failed. Noriega, thank you, Jesus Christ. Noriega, N-O-R-E, Nori. I don't know why hip-hop loves Noriega so much. But anyway, yes, you're right, Noriega. So then they go in and sabotage. And the purpose of the sabotage is to say, hey, this leader who's bringing us socialist, anti-colonial liberation, look at it, he's corrupt or he can't hold shit together. Everything's falling down around him. Socialism doesn't work. Everything's on fire. Everything's burning down. Our cattle are dying and our resources, our mines are collapsing and miners are trapped and dying and we can't get resources. Socialism doesn't work when it's a capitalist there sabotaging everything. And if that doesn't work, they'll kill the leader like they did Omar Torrijos. They killed Omar because they tried the economic hitman came, and then the jackals came, and then they were like, they just blew his plane out of the air. But the problem is sometimes when you kill a leader, they become martyrs, and more people rally to the cause. So if all of that fails, then they send in the Marines. That's what happened in Vietnam. They sent in the hitman. They tried to buy off Ho Chi Minh. They sent in the saboteurs and started a proxy war. They did the same thing everywhere. It's the same fucking formula. It's insane. It's so sad that they haven't had to change this formula in almost a century of colonization and imperialism. They do that in our communities too. They go to the militant leaders and say, hey, yeah, you are militant leaders. You call us devils. You write books about the fall of the nation. But hey, we give you some federal contracts. You can do security at public housing. We'll let you fly around the world and call us devils, but as long as you tell your people not to truly rise up, and you tell them you push, if you want to push do for self and self-sufficiency, make sure it's oriented towards capitalism and entrepreneurialism and not communism and socialism. Yeah, you can call us devils, but tell them some great God from the sky that you made up is going to come save them. Don't tell them to save themselves. And then you can still call. And so even our local leaders take that fucking deal. So we are at war. We have to respond accordingly, asymmetric, mutually assured destruction. And until we get to that, there's no negotiating with these people. So, and please stop regurgitating their rhetoric. When they say, oh, America's about to go to war with Venezuela, say, no, the United States has been at war with Venezuela for over a decade. Obama tried to implement a coup d'etat. Tell them about Hugo Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution and the progress that was made and the indigenous people in Venezuela rising up and getting those goddamn conquistadors out of power and trying to have a sovereign nation, and the allegiance they made with other indigenous leaders from Bolivia and Brazil and the Caribbean. Talk about how Venezuela, before the U.S. attacked, was sending oil and other resources and sending revenue, and gave $1 billion to Haiti to help Haiti decolonize and liberate itself. They sent relief funds when George Bush basically abandoned Louisiana during Hurricane Katrina. Venezuela was shipping resources and money to our people. Tell the people why Venezuela is being attacked is because they overcame the hitman, they overcame the jackals, and now here come the Marines. And it goes way back before the Obama administration. Obama tried to implement a coup d'etat. You can't convince me that they did not use some type of chemical agent to assassinate Hugo Chavez. They're there attacking an indigenous socialist revolution, the Bolivarian Revolution. Don't be, oh, America's about to attack. America's been attacking. You can maybe say they're going to escalate the conflict, but the United States, to put an embargo on a country is an act of war. If you walked out your front door and you saw a fence with barbed wire, and I'm like, you can't go to church, you can't go to work, you can't go to school, you can't go to the movies, and you can't get groceries, and you call your family and they're like, we bring you some care packages, and I'm like, no, you can't bring food in or out, and I put a barbed wire fence all the way around your house, and you were like, well, I'm not at war with BroDiallo. Yes, the fuck you is. So embargoes are war tactics, illegal war tactics. And so, in the many conflicts that are emerging and the ongoing conflicts, the United States is an aggressor. Every single president in our lifetime is an international war criminal, even Obama. International war criminal who committed international war crimes. Biden, Bush 1, Bush 2, even old Carter, JC, even old Mr. Habitat for Humanity engaged in international war crimes. The United States should not have any foreign military bases. And when these progressive politicians who are going to put freezes on rents, who promise to freeze rents, who promise to give Americans socialized health care, you tell them you also have to stop U.S. wars of aggression. Make the United States comply with its treaty obligations. Sign on to the ICC, but make the United States adhere to its treaty obligations to the UN. You have to be anti-capitalist if you claim to be anti-war. There shouldn't be a black organization claiming to act in the interest of African people at home or abroad that is not anti-capitalist and anti-war. You can't say you're anti-imperialism unless you're anti-capitalism. You can't say you're anti-colonization and talk about decoloniality unless you're anti-capitalist. You can't even claim that you're anti-racist if you're not anti-capitalist. So anyway, let's go over some questions. No, I'm not a Freemason. Why YouTube changed format? I don't mean by that. I'm not sure how it's changed. Uh, how am I railing against capitalists when I have one of the premier hood capitalists on your T-shirt? I don't know what a hood capitalist is. I have to confess, this is my era. This is my space. When I was a young man, freshman in college, and when I was in the club, it was a biggie, also known Black Frank White. So I like he could rap good. So, but he was not. As someone informed you that he was not does not qualify as a capitalist. And what's also funny is Biggie was very creative, but him and Tupac, neither one of them were gangsters or had legitimate gangster credentials. You saw it in pictures of Biggie Smalls in his little Catholic school uniform, and what's his name, Mr. Thug Life Tupac in his little performing arts school, doing plays and theatrics. Them dudes were more like me than like the thugs and criminals they rapped about. Thank you for the super sticker. Is that what that is? Thank you, Mark. Yes, I call Mandela and Uncle Tom. We can get into it if you want to get into it. Or just go read what Del Jones said. Because Del Jones was writing about Mandela's betrayal as it was happening. Del Jones was reporting on all of the treasonous agreements and the transformations and how Nelly Mandela was betraying his nation and portrayed Winnie Mandela and abandoned Willie Mandela to the jackals. So, yes. When will you speak up for us, Melanesia? Yeah, I should probably speak to what's happening in. I have mentioned the genocide in Australia, the ongoing genocide in Australia. I have talked about the ongoing genocide in New Zealand. But you're right. There are a lot of black people. This is a black planet that they fear. And there are so many atrocities happening and so much genocide. But I will give, let me make note of that. I will give more attention to that, to our Aboriginal brothers and sisters and our Asiatic brothers and sisters in Asia, because it is very true. And even in East Timor, the East Timorese and, the black people all over the world catching hell. But I respect that, and I do accept that I should and could give more attention to New Guinea, and Australia, New Zealand, Philippines. Oh, Philippines. Gee. Yes, you're right. I will talk more about people because I do tend to focus on black people in the U.S. and the New World, but Old World oppression is very prominent. Appreciate you giving that message. Okay, that's it. No, they're black, but they're not African. I say all the time, all Africans are black, but not all black people are Africans. They exited the African continent before the formation of Africa, so to speak. But we could talk about that. But they are brothers and sisters, or at the they are brothers and sisters, if not close cousins. I guess that's it. I don't like this. The book. Here's the thing about. Yeah, I have to go. I have to go and look up, because as I rack my mind, I know the books I like are not the books that other people will like, because the reality is I look at African history from a political standpoint more so than a historical standpoint. So I look at the evolution of nations and stuff, and that kind of locks you into a lot of transition from pre-colonial, but a lot of books about African antiquity. If you really want to read about African antiquity, I would probably think that some European writers, Albert Churchward, John G. Jackson, Signs and Symbols of Primordial Man, of course, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen. But it's impossible to say the best books. But I have to come up with some book categories and book lists. But probably I would say Dr. Ben Yakinen is probably my personal favorite author who writes about African antiquity. Yeah, that's it. Where are we at? Oh yes, shake hand to Geopsy. When you start to talking, people are already. That's it. Yes, shake hand to Job. I've done a video on Mandela and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I think it's called A Revolution Deferred. There's two Revolution Deferred. One of them focuses on South Africa. And I had some South Africans call and curse me out, but you can be mad at me, but don't be mad at the facts. But anyway, I appreciate y'all. See y'all next Monday. I got a new show. I have an interview coming up, but I want to do a show dealing with cults. And I got to find somebody to host and produce that show. That focuses specifically on cults that target the Black community. So it doesn't have to be a Black cult, because the morons and the Jehovah's Wickedness have substantial presence in the Black community on the African continent and the African diaspora. So talking about cults and interviewing active or former cult members, and even being willing to discuss members of those groups that have been identified as cults but would like to articulate why we are wrong to classify these various formations as cults. So I want to do that. I think it's a very important show. I touch on it frequently, but not enough. I think that's because one of the biggest hindrances is that a lot of people that become conscious and want to enter the conscious community, many of them are derailed by cults. There's a lot of Afrocentric, and I'm not just talking about religious cults. I mean, even the secular cults and cults of personality. Yes, and the Mormons are very prominent on the continent. And you talk to a lot of Mormons, they'll tell you, oh, their mission, it's a missionary religion. And a lot of white American missionaries head over to Africa. So anyway, thank you. We need to engage in anti-colonial, anti-racist class warfare, revolutionary warfare, liberatory war, asymmetric warfare. So the only answer to war, the only way to respond to war is with war. And as we oppose the U.S. war machines and its atrocities abroad, we have to mobilize for liberatory conflict. All right, that's it. Until next time, shout out to Skip Coon. Make sure you go out there and you hit up what's out there and prepare yourself for his new album. And I will go so far as to say this is his best album yet. Haven't listened to all of his albums. They're all good, but he's just getting better with time. I don't know what that is. But shout out to Skip. Shout out to James. Shout out to all of the African World Order family. Shout out to my Patreons. I'm so proud of myself getting this. I'm ashamed of myself because it took me too long to get my Patreon items back out. But now I'm proud of myself that I did it. But I'm ashamed of how long it took, and I'm not going to fall behind again. All right. And so until next time, y'all, I got to put the thing on the thing. Oh, I got to pass out the digital tin cup. Please make a positive contribution to the BroDiallo broadcast. As best you can. Do the best you can. And if you don't have the means to support monetarily, you can like, share, subscribe, and share the BroDiallo broadcast, past and present shows with your friends, enemies, allies, lovers, haters, and imitators. If you do that, I will be grateful. It is needed and it is appreciated. No, I don't. But I'm supposed to set up a African World Order Discord. So big things are going on. It's 2026. Until Trump and some other maggot psychopath blows up the world, we're going to continue this work and fight to win. All right, y'all. Peace.